There are three things I've learned never to discuss with people: religion, politics, and the Great Pumpkin.
The program you are about to hear is fiction, science fiction. We make no guarantees, however, how long it will remain fiction, fiction, fiction.
Foolish salutations. How's it going? I'm Mike, and welcome to Exofathom. I'm joined by my two lovely co-hosts, Nick and Ayla. How are you doing this Monday?
Happy Monday,
Feeling
man.
lovely.
Doing all right?
Yeah. My Monday's going all right. Do you believe in the Great Pumpkin?
I think we'd be foolish not to, right?
Do you know what the Great Pumpkin is?
Oh, yeah.
Ayla?
No clue.
No
No
clue.
clue.
So, have you ever read
clue.
Peanuts, the Charlie Brown comic?
Oh, no, but I did see that special partly because it had a lot of commercials when it would air in the fall. And then I'd lose interest.
It's all good. So there's this kid Linus, and he has a safety blanket, and he just carries it around. He's known for this blanket. But every year on Halloween, he goes out to this pumpkin patch and waits for the Great Pumpkin to arrive. And then one part he has this argument with Charlie Brown about Santa Claus versus the Great Pumpkin, and Charlie Brown realizes that they just have a difference in faith. It's pretty funny. It's pretty good stuff. But it
I should have stayed to watch the whole thing, huh? I kind of missed the point. I think I just enjoyed the drawings of leaves and trees and it was all Halloweeny. And then I think when they probably started getting talkie, I just was like, nah.
That's when it went womp, 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 womp.
Yeah.
Oh my God, it did. It did.
So that's kind of cool. I kind of want to talk about pumpkins, I guess, and great pumpkins. Do you put a lot of pumpkins and stuff? Do you eat a lot of pumpkins?
Never.
I've never had a pumpkin spice latte. I've never had one. And everybody talks about it. That makes me more afraid to have one. I'm like, there's got to be something wrong with it. There's some kind of magic. I don't want it.
It's just sugar. That's the magic. Everybody wants a cup full of sugar for their 2 shots of espresso.
Well, luckily I've never had to order a pumpkin spice latte or never had to make one. So I'm happy.
I don't know why Nick's knocking sugar. It's like, what, 2 cups of sugar makes the Monday go down?
I guess that's true.
It's a lot of sugar.
It is.
A lot of sugar.
So just we'll start diving in with some etymology things with pumpkins. So the word pumpkin originates from pipon, the Greek word. I'm probably mispronouncing that, which is okay. Which is Greek for large melon. It's something round and large. The French adapted this word to pompon, which the British changed to pompoyon, I think. And the later American colonists known to call it as a pumpkin. But interestingly, the pumpkin has no agreed upon botanical or scientific meaning. It is used interchangeably with squash or white squash. And then to properly clarify, because some folks, if we have listeners in New Zealand, Australia, or somewhere else, a pumpkin refers to all winter squashes. The one that we're going to talk about is the one that's, on every ad ever for Halloween. All pumpkins are winter squash. They are mature fruit of certain species in the genus Cucurbita. Commonistics commonly used to define pumpkin include smooth and slightly ribbed skin and deep to yellow color. Circa 2005, white pumpkins are, become more popular. They're grown around the world for pretty much on every continent they can be grown except for Antarctica, which will become later. This idea of ubiquity in pumpkins is symbolically important. So I want you to hold that in your head for a second. Production-wise, the world production of pumpkins, 27 million tons in 2017, with China and India taking 47% of the total. Russia, Ukraine, and the United States each produce 1 million tons. So, why do you think we make so many pumpkins? And why do you think the world produces so many pumpkins?
Well,
a lot of pumpkins all over the world.
Yeah, it's a lot of pumpkins. But I was just thinking right now, I'm like, and you know what? The U.S. doesn't even eat the pumpkins. I think the rest of the
Right.
world is eating the pumpkins, and we're just putting them on our porches.
Jerks.
Wait, are none of you pumpkin pie people?
Oh, well, I'll murder a pumpkin pie. That's yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I
no, I
like
don't
pumpkin pie.
necessarily like pumpkin pie, but I honestly don't know anybody. I don't think I've ever witnessed anybody make a pumpkin pie from scratch. So,
They're probably
Your cousin
magical.
did.
You have to request them from the ether.
yeah.
Sent to you.
From
But those like Cinderella pumpkins, they literally appeared out of nowhere 3 years ago. Like you're right, like those just popped up one day. Are
with
those
the white
GMO?
pumpkin?
Yeah.
Well, they've always been around. I remember when I was little.
I don't remember seeing. I guess like they were like flocked trees to me. Like if I saw them, I was like, oh my god, it's a white pumpkin. That's it. I haven't ran into too many of them. So I guess yeah, I could keep going on. Let's do this. So diving into the history, the archaeological evidence suggests that pumpkins and winter squash are native to the Americas, from the southwest part of what is now the United States through Mexico and Central America and south into Peru, Ecuador, and Colombia. Pumpkins have been cultivated since about 3500 BC, making it as old as maize or corn cultivation. Native Americans are said to have roasted long strips of pumpkin over an open fire and then consumed them. They also dried pumpkin strips and wove them into mats. And next, I have this kind of this poem from about 1630 by American colonists, just kind of showing how important the pumpkin was to our past. I'll go for it, Nick.
Oh no, I was just thinking like it's interesting that it's so life sustaining. I never really have heard the nutritional contents of a pumpkin before.
Well, it's like a squash and a gourd kind of vegetable, right? Like it's
It
got
is, yeah.
like seeds in it and like the fleshy parts. I know. I still like my mom loves squash. Like she loves it. And I think she'll do stuff with pumpkins, but like the seeds only. But yeah, I personally haven't done much squash eating or pumpkin eating for that matter.
I know. As I dived into the research, it turns out that pumpkins were basically used when there was nothing else left. Like when the Europeans came over, they didn't know really what to farm here, but again, that ubiquitous pumpkin saved them. That was pretty cool. And like we don't pay enough respects to the pumpkin as far as like you said, like as a dietary staple.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and like here's my question, because I know we have like really sophisticated farming techniques now, in theory. I mean, like they can always be better. But I mean, like the weather in London, is it that much different than the weather on the East Coast? Like, why was it so difficult to grow stuff over here? Do we know?
Pumpkins. So Columbus took pumpkins back, and there's pumpkin seeds back to Europe, and they took pumpkin seeds in general. However, pumpkins are kind of warmer weather. Like they grow in warm seasons really well.
Oh, sorry. I thought you meant that they brought pumpkins here and that was the only thing that they could cook. Sorry, I misheard that.
Oh no worries. No, they found pumpkins here, and it was the only thing that probably didn't kill them or tried to kill them. They hated it.
Got it.
And pumpkins are gross on the inside too. Could you imagine? I have like just eat all that stringy pulp.
Yeah, you pop it open. You're like, what should I do with this?
Yeah,
that'd be weird. But let me just dive into this little poem. It's kind of cool. It's neat. For pottage and puddings and custard and pies, our pumpkins, our parsnips, our common supplies. We have pumpkins at morning and pumpkins at noon. If it were not for pumpkins, we should be undone. So the colonists would pop off the top of that pumpkin, and they would remove all the seeds, all the guts and stuff, and then fill it with a mixture of milk, spice, and honey, and then bake it on top or in hot ashes. And then this is the rumored origin of the pumpkin pie. But that also sounds really good, just to put some milk and some honey and some spices into a pumpkin and bake it.
Sounds like a pumpkin spice latte.
Yeah. A proper pumpkin spice latte.
No wonder people love it so much.
Well, look, spice is amazing. And it's funny. The other day, I ventured out into the world, and I happened upon a farmer's market that was like about to close. Now, earlier that day, I had just said that I wanted to start drinking teas in the evening, but like spicy teas, like turmeric or something with cinnamon and a little milk. I literally just said it that morning. And then as I'm walking through the park, there's one little table at the farmer's market, and they have teas. And the one they recommended was like a chai, black pepper, turmeric. It was like a total spice tea. Like the spices sounded perfect. So needless to say, I bought it. And yeah, so anything with spices sounds good to me. Like I'm loving that like not sweet flavor, but that like something else flavor.
Yeah, it tastes like you're drinking autumn or something, right? Like you're part
Yes.
of the harvest.
Mm-hmm.
I know they're pumpkin-based drinks. I think are supposed to bring a bit of like that home feeling because it ends up like pup pumpkins become popular again in America when everybody moves to the cities and want to feel like the simple rural life again. And pumpkins were the
Interesting.
symbol of farming and all of the rural life kind of parts. So they started to gain an affinity for pumpkins that last until now. Obviously, if we're talking about pumpkin spice lattes.
Yeah, no, that's a really good idea too. Because like when you think about like a pumpkin patch, right? Like that's usually hosted by a place that farms pumpkins, and those types of farms are usually where you find farms. So it's only like recently that we would bring the pumpkins into the city and set up a pumpkin patch. Whereas before you'd go to the farm areas and like get it from the source, right? So that is totally interesting. And just one other thing too came to mind while you were talking. Like in Ayurveda, I don't know if it's just Ayurveda, but there's like a lot of dietitians and stuff where they say that like you should eat with the seasons. So like yeah, so like if pumpkins come into season around the fall, maybe it makes sense that we really do gravitate towards them. Not just because they're like more abundant, but because there's something like internal.
Well, it makes sense too that you would want to eat with whatever is fresh and in season,
Mm-hmm.
as far as gaining optimal nutrients from your foods. Especially since, especially back in the day, preserving food was basically throwing salt on it and burying it. So, like we didn't really have the ability to preserve food, so you wanted to eat with the seasons, eat with whatever's the fresh stuff, and pumpkins also kind of have that symbolism of the harvest. So I think that kind of coincides with the seasons, and then like the drawing in the end of summer, and the time for the harvest, and yeah.
Totally.
All those lovely signs. What do you think about like a pumpkin-based diet? Could you live a whole year on eating but nothing but pumpkins?
No.
I think this year has taught me I need a lot of diversity in my food. I can't eat the same thing every day. Oh God, pumpkin all year.
Yeah, like I think I could live off of pumpkin seeds. Like if I was like out on the frontier way back when and I only had these pumpkin seeds in my pocket from home or something.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think it would become how long can I go without having to eat another damn pumpkin? It's like
Right.
the last 3 months, I'd just be like, nope, I'm just gonna starve. And when I have to actually like eat something, I'm gonna just do it.
Oh, cool. Now that we've, I guess, scratched the surface on pumpkins, are there any like, I guess, general pumpkin thingy questions you guys have? Because I want to start looking at the pumpkin's role as a symbol in stories.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I didn't realize that you had shared the show notes like that you were reading. So I was sitting here trying to listen and my auditory processing's horrible. So one question, you had told us to remember something at one point. Can you remind me what we were supposed to
Yes, to
remember?
remember.
All I
Yeah.
heard was the caution and I was like, oh no, I wasn't listening.
Oh no, like in class. This will be on the
Terrible.
test.
Yeah, no, I need to read along. I can't just hear stuff.
It's the ubiquity of pumpkins. So how many pumpkins are just around, and that the fact they're able to grow everywhere in kind of this backbone of life if you think about it. Like if we have to go back as a country relying on pumpkins, we might actually be okay, you know?
Hmm.
They've just been used for food for that long. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, just keep in mind that ubiquity.
Okay. Which is funny because I really don't know that word well. So I've gathered that it means abundance or prevalence,
Hmm.
Yeah,
popularity. There's
for me,
something about a lot of them.
it's just everywhere. They're all kind of are the same thing, right? In my mind, I
Yeah.
guess let's see, what does Google have to say?
Also, too, when is the first, like, when did pumpkins pop up? Did you go over that?
Hmm.
3,500 BC. So it's a native thing to the Americas that they've been farming since corn. So around the
Yes,
same
since
time as like,
maize. Because again,
yeah,
I checked out. You said mice really well, and I was like, oh, mice. And I forgot about that word. And then, yeah.
my bad.
Yeah, no, I'm a horrible listener. Sorry, I'm getting in the game. I'm doing it.
No, you're good. Yeah, so ubiquitous is just present, appearing, or found everywhere.
Okay. I learned something.
Yay, things.
Go pumpkins.
Nick,
Hmm.
you're good on the general
Oh yeah,
pumpkins. All right.
definitely.
So I want to look
Teacher's
at.
pet. No, I'm
No,
fine.
I just
Now,
listen.
class. So I'm going to dive into a couple stories. Cinderella, the headless horseman, and then we could start to play with the jack-o'-lantern idea. Are we familiar with Cinderella, the little glass slipper story?
No, tell us the
No.
story.
Hold on, let me
What's the
animate it. I got a pen and paper right here. I'll draw you out the story real fast.
Okay. Are you gonna sing? Please tell me you're gonna sing.
I'm just gonna redirect you to the Cinderella movie.
There we go.
Just gonna hit play.
So yeah, we know the just to like overview the plot, I guess, or like this girl is really nice, really sweet, has kind of a shitty step family. There's a prince who is looking for a wife. They have a ball. Cinderella, the maid, can't go to the ball, so the stepsisters just make fun of her relentlessly. They end up going. Cinderella's sad, cries, calls for her godmother. Her godmother turns a pumpkin into a golden carriage. Again, I think the symbolism is very important. Takes him to the ball, or takes her to the ball. She's there. The prince falls in love. However, the whole spell of this turning Cinderella into a woman that can go to the ball only lasts until midnight. Once midnight happens, she turns back to a regular maid, but she holds onto a glass slipper that doesn't disappear. The prince finds it, and
Plot hole.
yeah, you know the tell.
Oh my god, I'm just
Um,
picturing myself as like a little kid in a bed, and I'm like, tell me the story of Cinderella, and like you're.
So there's this broad, she
Yeah, there's
has a
one
good family, yada yada yada.
All right, now go to
Stuff
bed.
happened.
She called the fairy godmother. Bing bang boom. She goes to the
Hand me that
ball.
whiskey over there real fast.
I love it.
But the kind of things I want to focus on more is like, why does the step family suck so much in Cinderella? Why are they so mean to her? And why do they even give her the name Cinderella?
Because it's a German story.
Yeah.
Always needed
Well, yeah, and like
evil family members.
so true. Plus, too, marriage back in the day was all about like wealth transfers, and so Cinderella lost total status because there was competing siblings, and then she had no one to vouch for her. I'm sure that the stepmom didn't really care about her dad. It might even, go deeper. I'm sure the dad was like 20 years older and the stepmom's like 14. That's why she's so petty. I mean, like you could just go on with the theories, but
Sure.
A lot of
yeah.
these fairy tales have like deep Freudian complexes, or it's
Do
like
tell.
well, I mean, Cinderella, like she had a father and then the father married this stepmother, then the father mysteriously dies, and then the stepmother is like resentful of the daughter, and like, yeah. And so she's trying to find that sort of like love from, that she got from her father. Like, yeah, it's just all of very weird archetypal stuff.
Well,
And the
yeah.
fact, go for it, Ayla.
Oh, I lost it. Sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It'll come back if it's important.
I think too, like the theme of Cinderella being really kind and really beautiful, also like it gives them reason to hate her, right? Like they're
Mm.
resentful of her because she's just sort of herself.
Yep. And yeah, and that reminds me of what I was gonna say, which was that, like when
They
we
hate
did
her because they ain't her.
Exactly.
thanks, Nick.
Did I make you lose it again?
You suck.
That's payback for last episode. Boom.
Wow. Revenge
Oh
on air.
man.
Look at that.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Was revenge. That's exactly the concept that was in my mind. Okay, so we did the episode on familiars, and I was looking up all these witchy stories. And the common theme was always really like somebody stole somebody's ox, or they didn't care their sheep, or they didn't feed this, like something happened, and it was like it could be chalked up to just revenge of, like, oh, you messed with me, so I'm gonna just call you a witch, or she hexed me because she thinks I did this or whatnot. So yeah, like I think looking
You didn't
back, like
fulfill an agreement or some sort of contract. Yeah.
yeah, and so I wonder, like, do you think people were like just more petty back in the day, or was it that this stuff was so much more life and death that like they just did what they had to do?
I think people died for some petty stuff back in the day.
Remember when you could just duel
Yeah.
somebody and shoot them? Like
Yeah.
what the
You still can. It's just
frowned
usually
upon?
there's no
You
it's
just
frowned upon in the
usually
society.
Oh my god.
get the electric chair.
Usually.
Mm.
Dang.
So just kind of like just reeling it back in. What if that the known variant of Cinderella has a more ancient version that goes back to the ancient Greeks? The story of Ro- Rhodopis. This is just kind of a footnote, something interesting, recounted by the Greek geographer Strabo sometime between 7 BC and 23 AD about a Greek slave girl who marries the king of Egypt. This is considered to be the onlyest known variant. The one that we know comes around about 1697 from a French author named Charles Perrault. I probably am pronouncing that wrong. But he added in the pumpkin, the fairy godmother, and the glass slippers. Now, the poem comes in about 1630 from the Americas, talking about how important pumpkins are. And then we get like 50, 60 years later, the the new version of Cinderella of sorts with the pumpkin included. So I think as Europe discovered the pumpkin, they got really fascinated by it and ended up working it more into their mythologies.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too how often I mean, like, well, I don't know. Sorry, I'm kind of mumbling right now. I'm just thinking about this Charles guy and like, what power of influence writers had back in the day that you could just totally shift this whole story and create this little element that becomes so crucial. But did he actually create that, or was that just kind of like some lore that was floating around that he just finally said, okay, I'm going to write this down and include it too? This is like a side thought that I had.
No, it is interesting. Like he's changed. I mean, we now know the story of Cinderella with the pumpkin in it, right? Like
Right.
you have to do some medieval digging to find the versions where it's not, there's no pumpkins there. So yeah, no, it is. You're right.
And do we know about like his story? Like, did he just really love pumpkin spice?
No, I didn't go diving too much into him. I was really fascinated on the idea as a pumpkin as a golden carriage and that transformation. Because
Oh.
we're gonna start to get into like the headless horseman, and the pumpkin as a symbol for a head is going to become important. So, so when I look at Cinderella through that scope and see the pumpkin become the golden carriage and her become from a maid to going to the ball, it's like a transformation in her mind, or like the head is almost like that golden carriage to carry her to the ball. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder if it could be used as a symbol for the mind in times when you have to deal with shitty people like the step family who's just constantly berating her. And the way that she gets to the
I like
ball
it.
is through the mind herself, or through the mind itself. And that touches upon like the world is mental sort of things.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Am I reaching too
Well,
far
yeah, because
here?
there's an element of.
No, I don't think
Well,
so.
no, I
I
mean
think
the
that's a pretty
story.
good.
I think we
Go
have a
for it,
lag.
Aaron.
Sorry. Oh, I was just gonna say, grandmother magic, pumpkin, mentalism. It makes sense to me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree. I think it would definitely seem as though perhaps, and especially when when she's wishing for her fairy godmother to come help her out, that sort of like intense intention thought creating, and then obviously the visual representation of the pumpkin, which on its own without any sort of symbolism is a big bombastic sort of fruit. Like it's bright, it's orange, they're usually rather large. So it's definitely one that would be good for illustration, because especially when you say they're ubiquitous, it's easy to imagine a pumpkin in your brain. you know the
Yeah.
other things might be more difficult to grasp.
Like one of those God, I only know them as Widowmakers. What was that episode we did them on? The acorn thing? Yeah, the
The pine
acorn thing.
cone.
The pine cone, yeah.
Uh-huh.
There you go. Yeah, like
Pine
it's
cone.
you're getting these like recurring symbols, right?
Hmm.
Your pumpkin has a head.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go into some headless things, some headless horsemen. Headless Horseman is a fictional character from the 1820 short story The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. Uh, ba, ba, ba. The Legend of the Hidden Horseman begins in Sleepy Hollow, New York during the American Revolutionary War. Traditional folklore holds that the horseman was a Hessian trooper. Hessian troopers were German mercenaries hired by the British, who was killed during the Battle of White Plains in 1776. He was decapitated by an American cannonball, and the shattered remains of his head were left on the battlefield while his comrades hastily carried his body away. Eventually, they buried him in the cemetery of the Old Dutch Church, Sleepy Hollow, from which he rises as a malevolent ghost, fiercely seeking for his lost head and wielding a jack-o'-lantern as a temporary replacement and/or weapon. More modern versions of the story refer to his rise as to around Halloween as like because that's the time that the battle happens. I think it happened on October 28th, 1776. But the notion of even like an exploding head like a pumpkin that an American cannonball takes off, I think there's something more than just like this coincidence that it takes place near Halloween, you know?
Hmm.
That or it just could simply serve for the imagery involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? How do you feel about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Headless Horsemen's?
Go ahead, Nick. I'm waiting on you.
Oh, no, I was waiting on you. Go
Oh,
ahead.
okay. No, I didn't want. I feel like I'm talking a lot, so I was gonna let
No,
you.
you're fine.
Oh, okay. Well, I just watched the movie with Johnny Depp in it, and what is it? Christina Ricci.
Hmm.
And it just gets better every time I watch it. I mean, I don't know. I do have a penchant for like watching and loving bad movies. Like Sharknado is really hilarious, just like Snakes on a Plane is. I just enjoy them. But Sleepy Hollow was cool because it kind of went the witchy route and it kind of looked at punishment by the state and in like the witch trials and how like unfair and weird that whole thing was. But um the old version, which I don't know if Disney did it or like one of the competitors, but it fixated more on the pumpkin and the headless horseman. It seemed like it had a lot of themes in it. Like it had the theme of the unknown and fear. Also like the rumor mill, because not everybody had seen it. It was just rumored that this thing was coming around and killing people. And so it's like you can have an event that's scary, but you can have the hype about that event that's even scarier, because if you haven't experienced it, then hearing about it, it gets so much bigger in your head, which gets back to like mentalism. And that's like the first thing that came to my mind.
Mm.
Well, I don't know if that's mentalism, but just the idea of like
No,
the
it is.
power of the mind.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Well, and I wonder too if the story of Sleepy Hollow. Do we know when that originated, or is that kind of just from the lore of the battle in 1776?
So there's like a bigger overarching stories of headless things, like headless horsemen in general. It's usually characters that die in a battle or something like that. Some of them go as far back as Arthurian lore. I was going to call it Arthurian logic. That would have been interesting. But Arthurian lore, and I think it could even go further back. But Sleepy Hollow itself is an American story.
Right.
It is confined to that battle of White Plains.
Well, I wonder if because I'm asking that because the concept of the pumpkin for a head wouldn't be as threatening if it wasn't a jack-o'-lantern. So I'm wondering if like this kind of story or lore would predated the jack-o'-lantern, which obviously is not as old. So because if he's riding around, headless horseman's riding around with a pumpkin on his head, that's not very menacing looking.
Right, but the jack-o'-lantern has to be very menacing.
Right, exactly.
Well, the jack-o'-lantern goes back. We'll get there because it ends up diving into like Irish pagan thing. We're getting to Samhain. We'll get there. But no, you're right. The jack-o'-lantern is very important because if it is just a gourd or a pumpkin, then it just looks silly, right?
Yeah, it just looks like somebody's playing a joke.
Well, no, someone's playing a joke. No, it's true. And then like I think it's interesting to the idea of the power of the image of the headless horseman, like in the Tim Burton film, the big what's his Skellington? What is it called?
Nightmare Before Christmas.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, all I remember it as it's like the Halloween film that's called not Halloween. It's just like that's all I could get. But sorry, I just had such a long brain intensive day. It took a lot of thinking. I lost it. What am I thinking? Oh,
well,
no. The fact that they had their main character be a headless like skeleton guy, like that means something. Like that even in that movie it was like the top scary guy and a leader figure of the Halloween holiday.
Yeah.
So anyway, I just adding to
losing your head is quite scary.
Well, and
yeah, I'm feeling it now.
And is it also possible that the correlation to the pumpkin was because he got his head blown open like a pumpkin? Right. When people on the battlefield said it, man, like, yeah, man, you should have seen it. His head blew up like a pumpkin.
That's what I would think. Like if when you're doing target practice things, right? Back then, if they did do target practice, which I'm sure somebody did, it might not be in like the professional militaries at the time, but not too sure. Why wouldn't you use a pumpkin if they're everywhere?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, they're so ubiquitous. So yeah, it all starts to like tie in and make that image of like, yeah, I can see that being thrown around the battleground. Like, dude, you should have seen Bob's head. It just popped like a pumpkin.
Right.
Right. Yeah, so kind of like I want to take a small sidestep and talk about headless things because they're scary, and then we'll move into the jack-o'-lantern and then the whole replacement. So I want to start off with Dante's Divine Comedy and the eighth circle of hell, which is fraud. And in the eighth circle, there's these trenches that go further, like they're like a cone shape, like a funnel shaped. And as you go down, there's a new ditch. And each ditch has a different punishment for the sinners until down at the bottom is the port to the ninth circle of hell. And so on this ninth ditch, it's preserved for the schismists. So basically anybody who tries to divide people or divide anything. So in Dante's Divine Comedy, Canto 28, to be exact, the poet meets a specter of the troubadour Bertrand de Born in the eighth circle of the Inferno, carrying his severed head in his hand, slung by its hair like a lantern. Upon seeing Dante and Virgil, the head begins to speak. The knight himself is said to have caused a quarrel, the knight being Bertrand de Born, between Henry II of England and his son, Prince Henry the Young King. His punishment in hell is decapitation, since dividing father and son is like severing the head from the body. And then on the opposite side, you have these headless saints known as the Celophores, uh, or the Celophores, the Sephirophore, which is Greek for head carrier. I misspelled it. Is a saint who is generally depicted carrying his own severed head. In Christian art, this was usually meant to signify that the subject in question has been martyred by beheading. Handling the halo in this circumstance offers a unique challenge for the artist. Some put the halo where the head used to be. Others have the saint carrying the head along with carrying the halo along with the head, and some split the difference. Just like some weird King Solomon thing of halos, I guess. Associated legends can often tell of the saints standing and carrying their own head after beheading. And there's different examples of this, but I find the quote interesting. I don't think I have it actually in the notes. But there's this idea that a saint being beheaded terrified the devil. And after being beheaded, some of these saints were known to stand on their head after their own beheading. Yeah, often saints standing and carrying their own head after beheading. So why is this headless thing so important? Why is the head, again, being seen like a lantern?
Well, the concept of illumination, right? And so enlightenment, illumination, we kind of run these parallels to intelligence and thought and reason. It's interesting to me is that there were saints in the Inferno, and they were martyred saints.
Well,
that's quite bizarre.
That might have been my accident of just rolling these ideas. So Celophore, or the Cephalophore, different than the
they
Inferno.
weren't in Inferno.
So, the one that you find in the Inferno was actually due to his sin, while the Cephalophore has been sainted somehow.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same thing. They're both getting decapitated, but one's light and one's dark.
I think it's also like if you believe in an afterlife, and most of these ancient cultures do, then maybe the idea is that if you cut your head, like you were saying, if you die by decapitation, then you are destined to carry that burden with you for the rest of your afterlife. You'll never be attached to it again. You will always have to carry your head throughout the afterlife. So maybe that's an extra layer of punishment or, malice.
Yeah, but then why when you take this punishment, right, and you become sanctified, you actually scare the devil. Like this punishment now holds no weight on you, right? Like to the point where you're even able to stand and preach. Because if you go deeper in the lore of headless saints, there's saints that, gave whole sermons while holding their head.
I think it's bizarre. Yeah, I think it's because, and this might just be the social implications of it, right? So perhaps it's because to execute a saint is something that we should probably not do as a society. So to be a headless saint to the devil is like, an abomination. Therefore, we shouldn't be executing saints, or beheading saints. Because it's kind of like this inversion of the course of reality. I don't know if I can explain it any better, but I was thinking like it would be like a cautionary tale to future generations about the concepts of extreme punishment, because I don't know how these saints died, but I assume it's for heresy or something like that. So it's like a cautionary tale in that, like, if the devil thinks that this is even this is repulsive, that we shouldn't continue this in our society.
Yeah. And I wonder too, from like, just how terrifying are you if you could scare the devil?
Yeah, you got to be pretty freaky looking. Maybe that hints to the unnaturalness of being beheaded as well. This concept that you're just like not a whole person anymore. And in fact, you're carrying around the thing that actually makes you a person.
Yeah, I can see that. That because the head is quite important, right? If all is
Mhm.
mental, you have no head. Do you have anything anymore?
Right. Exactly.
And when you
And maybe the
talk
devil's
about
like, dude, these guys are crazy. They're just standing on their heads. What is going on here? I don't
from
even make people do this.
from the simulation point of view, there's the devil's like, I got to put in a bug report. There's
Yeah.
things walking around on their head. It's
There's some
scaring me. I don't
clipping
like
going
it.
on.
Yeah. Um, so what a now like now we've established headlessness and like the terrifying nature of it. Now I kind of want to move over to the jack-o'-lantern and the replacement of a head, and we can dive deeper into what I think these stories are actually all a tale of. Um, so first, the hold on, Ayla, do you have any comments on this story?
No, I'm good. I'm on a timeout.
I got you.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts over here, but I want to kind of see where you're taking this because I don't want to derail it. So
Like,
it's a lot of good stuff.
no, you're good. Um, so the etymology behind jack-o'-lantern. The term jack-o'-lantern was originally used to describe the visual phenomenon ignis fatuus, literally foolish fire, known as the will-o'-wisp in English folklore. Usually, or used especially in East England, its earliest known use dates to the 1660s. The term will-o'-wisp uses wisp, a bundle of sticks or paper sometimes used as a torch, and the proper name will, thus will of the torch, which is its whole own interesting thing if you consider the will of the illumination of knowledge. And then the term jack-o'-lantern is of the same construction, jack of the lantern. Let's see, impossible. North fat here. Here he is. So kind of want to look at the will-o'-wisp etymology too, real quick. A will-o'-wisp was like, think of Harry Potter Patronuses by like the lake. In folklore, there's these spirits that come around and misguide travelers. Um, in chemistry, in science, the phenomenon is a bioluminescent caused by organic decay. So these could be ghosts or pretty death particles, I don't know. But the etymology is, despite its Latin origins, the term ignis fatuus is not attested in antiquity. And what the ancient Romans called the will-o'-wisp name may never be known. The Latin term fatuus is not immediately related to the word fate, which is from the Latin fata. Uh, it has a different pronunciation. Instead, in English, it is directly related to the word to infatuate, which becomes kind of important when you think about it in like the Cinderella sense. It is thought that both are ultimately from the Proto-Indo-European root. I'm not even going to try to pronounce beh, means to speak, as fatus, in the archaic literal sense of being able to speak of the things yet to happen, was originally associated with the Roman god Faunus. The Roman god Faunus could be mapped to the Greek god Pan. However, authors like Vigil, who wrote the Divine Comedy, will separate them. But the semantic shift to silly would have been pejorative in nature, as such foretellings of the future would come to be regarded as silly by the ancient Romans. So that was a lot. So you have this jack-o'-lantern, you have this pumpkin with this will-o'-wisp, this foolish fire in between. Does that change anything for you as far as the Headless Horseman story? And like also too, what do you think is meant by Jack of the Lantern and Will of the Torch?
Well, pardon me. For me, when I hear will-o'-wisp, and then you said will of the torch, and then we kind of talk like it reminds me of the Prometheus and the stealing of fire and carrying the torch down to humans. That kind of being a metaphor for enlightenment and higher understanding. So yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting. Now, I don't know exactly how it would tie in, but it's like this vessel for the human like thought or something, not thought, but like the fire of of enlightenment almost.
Yeah. But why is it foolish though?
That might be lost in translation.
I have a
Because
thought.
yes, please, Ayla.
Well, okay, so okay, I have a lot of thoughts. I'm trying to keep them
Okay.
tidy. So one thing that we haven't brought up is the act of decapitation. That, like, what would have happened if you had seen somebody getting decapitated? There's a lot of ways for it to happen, but if you look at like the time of Henry VIII, for example, and the stories of all the public executions that he did, so often you'll hear stories that the executioner would, cut the head off and then pick it up and hold it in the air for all to see. And again, I think that's a way of instilling fear. Do good things or else this could be you, you know? And one of the stories would talk about how the head, like the eyes, will actually look out, right? Because I think, what is it, like 4 minutes for all of the, like for your brain to stop functioning when severed. So like the eyes still move,
Twitch.
they can twitch, yeah, and then even bodies, rigor mortis can like you can still have a cadaver that's in like storage, and it could just sit up for no reason because it's still twitching. And like, having butchered sheep when I was a kid, like, if you throw, like, I remember the first time my grandmother cut one of the legs off after butchering it. Sorry, people, but, and then you put it on the table and you could see the muscle just moving and contracting. And it did that for a really long time. Roosters too, if you kill them and let them go, like they will keep running until they, like, eventually, I don't know exactly what stops them at that.
Ayla, you said something pretty great, and I wanted to just kind of add to what you were saying just a second ago about public executions.
Yes.
That imagery that you said of like the executioner holding the severed head out into the crowd to instill fear, that
Yes.
really just harkens back to the tale of Perseus and Medusa.
Yes.
And how he took the head of Medusa as a trophy and then used it against another creature, I believe, in order to turn it into stone.
Yes.
So yeah, sorry.
Well, yeah, and that's thank you for, because I was getting way into like, oh, and here's another way an animal could do. Okay, so a while earlier, one of the guys that was in hell, it was a knight who had separated father and son. And they were just talking about, like, when you think of the father and the son, that immediately made me think of the mind and the body of government and citizens. And I just thought about that, like, correlation. And like Nick had pointed out too, with the mind, like, if you want to control somebody, you can control their body, but like, how do you control their mind? And I think that's kind of where it went. I don't want to get too conspiratorial or anything like that, but there is a lot of literature about that, just about how societies punish people. It's punishment of body, and there's some history about punishing the mind, like, you think about like isolation rooms and things like that. Like, I don't know, it's just interesting
how those things can be like an American cannonball to the mind.
Or even before, I mean, like, look, freaking in France. Yeah, I don't want to get into all the gory details, but like Reid Foucault is really good. He like, and it's not even like fancy highfalutin language. It's just he's telling stories of like the ways that they would torture people and kill them. Yeah.
So that fire inside, the the will o' the wisp.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think those are ghosts? Do you think they're pretty death particles? What do you think they are?
I mean, if it's hope, that's the other side of fear. I mean, like, like hope's on the light side and fear and scary stuff's on the other.
And just to kind of go back to
It's
that
the
image.
flame of imagination.
Ooh.
Imagination.
Now I want to watch Willy Wonka.
Well, also too, where do will-o'-wisps usually grow? Don't they usually grow in kind of like swampy areas?
Yeah, swampy.
Yeah, England has moors and Scotland and all that. Yeah.
No.
Yeah, because then Well, yeah, I just think of wisps and I think of like fog. I think of more unknown, fear of the natural world, urban legend, superstition, ghosts. Makes sense.
Or some urban legend we'll jump into is the jack-o'-lantern story. Now, ready for that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
The ornament? All right. As the story goes, several centuries ago, amongst a myriad of towns and villages in Ireland, there lived a drunkard known as Stingy Jack. Jack was known throughout the land as a deceiver, manipulator, and otherwise dreg of society. On a fateful night, Satan overheard the tale of Jack's evil deeds and silver tongue. Unconvinced and envious of the rumors, the devil went to find out himself whether or not Jack lived up to his vile reputation. Typical of Jack, he was drunk and wandering through the countryside at night when he came upon a body on his cobblestone path. The body was an eerie grimace. The body with an eerie grimace on its face turned out to be Satan. Jack realized somberly that this was his end. Satan had finally come to collect his malevolent soul. So Jack made a last request. He asked Satan to let him drink ale before he departed to Hades. Finding no reason to not to acquiesce to the request, Satan took Jack to the local pub and supplied him with many alcoholic beverages. Sounds like my kind of night. Upon quenching his thirst, Jack asked Satan to pay the tab on the ale, much to Satan's surprise. Jack convinced Satan to metamorphosize into a silver coin with which to pay the bartender. Satan did so, impressed upon by Jack's unyielding nefarious tactics. Shrewdly, Jack stuck the now transmogrified Satan, the coin, into his pocket, which also contained a crucifix. The crucifix's presence kept Satan from escaping his form. This coerced Satan to agree to Jack's demand. In exchange for Satan's freedom, he had to spare Jack's soul for 10 years. 10 years later to the date when Jack already struck his deal, he naturally found himself once again in Satan's presence. Jack happened upon Satan in the same setting as before, and he seemingly accepted it was his time to go to Hades for good. As Satan prepared to take him to hell, Jack asked if he could have one apple to feed his starving belly. Foolishly, Satan once again agreed to the request. As Satan climbed up the branches of his nearby apple tree, Jack surrounded the base with crucifixes. Satan, frustrated at the fact that he had been entrapped again, demanded his release. As Jack did before, he made a demand that his soul never be taken by Satan into Hades. And Satan agreed and was set free. Eventually, all that drinking took a toll on Jack and he died. Flaky Jack, or Stingy Jack, he has like 5 names, soul prepared to enter heaven through the gates of St. Peter, but he was stopped. And Jack was told by God that because of his sinful lifestyle of deceitfulness and drinking, he was not allowed into heaven. Jack then went down to the gates of hell and begged for admission into the underworld. Satan, fulfilling his obligation to Jack, could not take his soul. To warn others, he gave Jack an ember, marking him a descendant of the netherworld. From that day until eternity's end, Jack is doomed to roam the world between the planes of good and evil, with only an ember inside a hollowed turnip, which we later found to be the pumpkin. I think they use gourds in Europe to light his way.
That story is so good. Wow.
It's like a Bugs Bunny cartoon. He's just finessing Satan all the time.
The whole way. And then he's like, all right, can you let me into hell? I can't get into heaven.
He's like, no, banishing you to the netherworld.
That's what
Here's
happens when you get kicked out of all the bars that you can't handle your hot.
Right.
So I'm going to ask again, what is it to be the Jack of Lanterns? Is it that Jack of all lights to trick both God and Satan, and in the Promethean sense to trick Zeus?
Yeah, I think there's some sort of like in between, like that we all have. It's like, I think at least, perhaps we think that as humans, we're not necessarily perfect enough to get in heaven, but maybe not wicked enough to go to hell. And there's this kind of like, purgatory that is, this realm. And yeah, I don't know. It's interesting though that we carry a light for somebody who is such a cad, like can just kind of just trick the devil, but still didn't make it into heaven.
No, and it just wanders.
Well,
Mhm.
yeah, but I think it's also, I mean, I don't know. I could be reading way too much into it, but it seems to me that, like, in the beginning of the story, they say that he was known as a silver-tongued deceiver, a manipulator. Um, and that caught the eye of Satan. So it's like that proverb, the wooden peg that stands tallest is the first to get knocked down. It's
Mhm.
almost like a cautionary tale. Like, yeah, you can be smart and do these, you can be witty or talk well, but the minute that you get noticed, like, be careful. And obviously, I don't think you should be try to be a good person. Like, this guy sounds like he's kind of a jerk. But for the times that it probably originated, I just think about, like, banned books, the war on thinkers, like, there tends to be a long history of um cautionary tales against, speaking out or being this, like, light to try to deceive the powers that be. Because I'm sure at the time he thought, well, if I don't go into hell, and I might not, I would just have to go to heaven. Like, I don't know if anybody told him about the netherworld. So it's like
Yeah.
trying to be really smart and then messing up because you didn't know all the back end rules
Yeah.
or something.
This sounds like Robin Hood traders.
You
Yes.
can't trick your way into heaven. That's the moral of the story, right? So it's
No.
like he was able to avoid the devil, but once he arrived at the pearly gates, he was still turned away. So
But
Mhm.
like you would think he would know that he would be turned away, right? So maybe
you think,
the whole
Mm.
trick was just to not
Go to
get
hell.
into not go to hell. Because if you think about it, he lives this life that is punishable, but he's tricked the devil into not receiving the punishment, and also he's tricked God now that he's kind of void of his punishment, right? Like,
mm,
now God has no way to really punish this guy for what he's done, and so now he just gets to wander the nether planes for an eternity. So
yeah,
maybe that was the whole game plan.
better to have your fate sealed than wander forever aimlessly, though, I guess.
That could be true too, especially
Yeah,
without
that
a
is
head.
interesting. Right. Yeah, it's
Or
interesting how, like, averse they are to these, like, in betweens. It's got to be one or the other.
yeah, you can't, like, you have to pick a side. There's no
Mm.
centrism in religion.
Mm-mm.
Uh, so like kind of so we have the devil that's envious, right? And in Cinderella, I can make the argument that the step family's envious of Cinderella. And then in the Headless Horseman story, you have this mercenary who lost his head and now is envious of the living for having theirs as he looks for his own. Am
Mm.
I okay making those arguments?
I think those are pretty
Mm-hmm.
interesting ones. Yeah.
Yeah. So then this all ties everything down to one thing: envy. This thing. So I want to now bring in the Testament of Solomon, which is I'm going to try to pronounce this word, uh, pseudepigraphical composite. So ghostwriters basically wrote it.
Well done.
Text ascribed to King Solomon and so associated with the Old Testament, but not regarded as canonical structure by Jews or Christian groups. It was written in the Greek language, based on precedents dating back to the early first millennium CE, but was likely not completed in any meaningful textual sense until sometime in the medieval period. In its most noteworthy re- recensions, the text described how Solomon was enabled to build his temple by commanding demons by means of a magical ring that was entrusted to him by the archangel Michael. And one of these episodes, I do want to do a full thing on the Testament of Solomon because it's really interesting. But the spoiler warning: the things don't end up so well for Solomon. But I want to focus tonight on his encounter with envy. And so I'm just going to dive into it and read this story. Uh, but I, Solomon, glorified the Lord and bade another demon come before me. And there was brought to me a demon having all the limbs of a man, but without a head. And I, seeing him, said to him, Tell me, who art thou? And he answered, I am a demon. So I said to him, Which? And he answered me, I am called Envy, for I delight to devour heads, being desirous to secure for myself a head. But I do not eat enough. but am anxious to have such a head as thou hast. I, Solomon, on hearing this, sealed him, stretching out my hand against his chest. Whereon the demon leapt up and threw himself down, and gave a groan, saying, Woe is me! Where am I to come to, O traitor Orinus? I cannot see. So I said to him, I am Solomon. Tell me then how thou dost manage to see. And he answered me, by means of my feelings. I then, Solomon, having heard his voice come up to me, asked him how he managed to speak. Managed to speak. And he answered me, I, O King Solomon, in a holy voice, for I have inherited the voices of many men. For in the case of all men who are called dumb, I it is who smashed their heads when they were children and had reached their 8th day. Then, when a child is crying in the night, I become a spirit, and I glide by means of his voice in the crossways. Also, I have many services to render, and my encounter is fraught with harm. For I grasp in all instant a man's head, and with my hands, as with the sword, I cut it off, and put it onto myself. And in this way, by means of the fire which is in me, through my neck it is swallowed up. I it is that sends grave mutilations and incurables on men's feet and inflict sores. And I, Solomon, on hearing this, said to him, Tell me about thou dost discharge forth the fire. Out of what sources dost thou emit it? And the Spirit said to me, From the day star. For here hath not yet been found that Elberion, there it is, to whom men offer prayers and kindle lights. Elberion is a false god, I believe. And his name is invoked by the 7 demons before me, and he cherishes them. But I said to him, Tell me his name. But he answered, I cannot tell thee, for if I tell his name, I render myself incurable. But he will come in response to his name. And on hearing this, I, Solomon, said to him, Tell me then, by what angel thou art frustrated? And he answered, By the fiery flash of lightning. And I bowed myself before the Lord God of Israel, and bade him remain in the keeping of Baal-zebub until Inox should come. So I find that really intriguing about, this headless demon, but this heart of fire that uses feelings to see everything, and it devours and ignites heads and is always hungry. I have a feeling that these headless tails and pumpkin tails, using the head for a pumpkin, something that we eat, that we devour ourselves, has its origins with this, or at least has some connections with this telling of envy. And with the Greek influences, being envy itself being afraid of a flash of lightning, that makes me think of Zeus.
I think he's referring to Lucifer, though, no?
What, the flash of lightning? Or
I don't
Basil?
know, perhaps. I mean, well, he says the morning star or the day star, which is Lucifer, and then he says that he won't say the deity's name. So he could be either talking about God or Lucifer at that point. I'm not sure.
Yeah, the angels that frustrate the demons still. I don't think it's Lucifer, because by this point, Lucifer had already descended into hell.
But it would make sense that demons still call themselves angels, because they still feel like they are angels. They just were given a bad rap.
No, they're
Way to empathize with what they go through.
But in Testament, they tend to refer to themselves as gods. Like, you find the 7 sisters, you find the Pleiades, you find other demons in there, and they tend to not. They don't mind not being called an angel anymore, at least within this text. There's also another variation of the text, or another translation for day star, which means from the Orient. So it could just be the sun. There's also in Egyptian mythology the story of Ra carrying the sun across the sky in a golden carriage, in a golden chariot. So it could be mixing in some of those lores.
Could be. But I mean, the morning star historically means Lucifer, though. At least in the biblical sense, yeah.
Yeah, remember, non-canonical now, so we
That's
can
right.
we can
Yeah.
operate with a bit more freedoms in our interpretations of the
That's
text.
right.
Well,
Well, I think it was interesting, just to touch upon it a little bit. The concept of the head swallowing other heads, or the neck swallowing other heads, and how this is like an insatiable sort of impulse, and it would it kind of it kind of seems to me that perhaps there is some messaging about the voracious appetite one can develop in the pursuit of knowledge and answers. And I think that especially when you're juxtaposing it against more religious types of philosophies, the one that would be voracious for knowledge could be looked at as something demonic.
I would agree too, and I think that quest for knowledge. It's interesting how envy appears like a fool. Like even when he first appears to Solomon, Solomon asks him, "Who are you?" And he goes, "I'm a demon."
Mm-hmm.
Well, no shit, Sherlock. I'm summoning demons. Of course you're a demon. Now that might speak to envy's arrogance as well. But I do like the idea that, yeah, in this quest for knowledge, the fire that burns is great, but it can be foolish in the sense that you don't know what you don't know, I guess. So you end up hungering for heads to devour.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's something to be said about just because you may know things and have knowledge doesn't necessarily mean you have understanding. And I think that can drive somebody insane as well. Is this quest for because the goalpost is always moved. Anytime you get to the place you think you're going to find the answers, it's already 100 yards away from you again.
Yeah, like knowledge is a great torch, but wisdom is that kerosene. You need to light it and carry it on the right way.
Yeah. Or knowledge is a finish line, and wisdom is just deciding not to run the race.
You're just like, yeah, fuck it.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Jackie Brown?
A long time ago.
Very long time ago.
My favorite character is the girl in the apartment. She just lounges around and gets high and watches cartoons.
Mm-hmm.
And you find out that it's actually her apartment. It's not like Samuel L. Jackson's apartment. And they ask her about ambition, and she's like, "What if my ambition is to not have ambition?"
Yeah, exactly. It's fair.
So yeah, damn, you made it. You're on the beach. You got your TV.
What else can you ask for?
Right, simple. I don't know why that kind of going back. Oh, okay, this lightning strike.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of want to take it from the point of with Zeus, like that he's afraid of Zeus.
Mm-hmm.
But why would why the flash of lightning would scare away? Why would the flash of lightning scare away envy in the intellectual sense? Is it like that I got it moment where you're no longer envious of somebody? Like say you're in a class and you're studying for a test and your study partner understands something that you don't, so you're envious of them, but then you get that aha moment where you get it, and now that envy moves away.
Yeah. And I think it would be that something along the lines that God is associated with clarity and truth. And so the imagery of the lightning bolt is like a cutting through the sky with clarity, which, if you're a demon that consumes, knowledge and information and wants people's brains, then perhaps that would be something you're afraid of. But furthermore, demons are also afraid of the name of God because it's like a spell to banish them. So that's probably why he wouldn't want to speak the name of God.
Yeah, no, the throughout the Testament, Solomon asks the various demons which angel frustrates them, and that, which I find interesting use of language. It's not like which angel banishes you, which angel gets rid of you. So, no, by what angel thou art frustrated, and different demons give different answers. Usually going back to Michael, Raphael, or in this case, Iax, I believe, is an angel that is just hidden obscurity, or we just haven't found much about, I believe. But that it is interesting that like these sort of vices, I guess, intellectual vices, these demons, whatever, do have those angels that frustrate them but don't banish them.
Hmm. Well, kind of like putting an opposition to.
Yeah, like an adversary for the adversary, I guess.
Hmm.
Uh, so then, like that fire, I want to talk a little bit about like the Promethean flame because I like that self enlightenment, as we touched upon, is might be the fire within envy, which ends up being that little tiny, I think that little tiny wick of flame that ends up being in the jack o' lantern, like the ember that Jack gets in the jack o' lantern story. I feel like might be a little light of the heart of envy,
Mm.
with the devil being envious that he got tricked and wanted, even in the story, he talks about the devil being envious and God being envious that he can't properly punish, this derelict or this
And then
desert of society.
Jack being envious that all the souls have places to go except for him.
Yes.
Hmm.
And then you could pull that back to the headless horseman, being envious and whatnot, of him lacking his own head.
So remind
So
me, why did Linus want to see the Great Pumpkin? It sounds like this is not something you want to hang out with.
well, the Great Pumpkin was the writer originally had it. We just wanted a character that confused Christmas with Halloween, which we do. We have a weird relationship with Halloween and Christmas, right? Like we just skip over Thanksgiving, but
Hmm.
and then we have elements of Halloween in
Yourself,
Christmas, and then elements of Christmas in Halloween.
words
Yeah.
with pumpkin pie and mashed potatoes. There is no skipping of Thanksgiving in my house. I guess maybe there should be, right, given history, but I don't care. I like my turkeys. But Halloween, and yeah, it's just an interesting holiday, and I love how much like people get into it now. And this might just is like a small divergence, but I was thinking about as you were reading about like the Solomon story and just like lamenting how little I know about like religious texts and history and those stories. Like there aren't really any anchor points in my mind. So I should read more about that. But then I started thinking, if you were going to learn the history of the world, so like, all the way ancient times, Egypt, Rome, Greeks, like, everything, would you want to learn it forwards or in reverse? Because to me, like when we talk about like Prometheus and Greek mythology, there's this feeling like there is a truth that we used to know that maybe has been lost, or we've, skewed it so many times and we want to look back to kind of pull meaning and remembrance from it. But like, I don't know, like, did they have it all figured out? Because with so much talk of envy, like, I mean, I know envy exists today, but I feel like we're so much more comfortable talking about coping with it. And like, like social media, everyone's talking about like, oh, envy and I don't know, like trying to keep up with the Joneses and stuff. But it's like we've been, I don't know. It, do you know what I mean? Like,
No, I know what you mean.
yeah, like it's just funny that we're still gripping with these same things. And back then it was just so prevalent. Like there's a lot of lore that goes into that one.
It's almost like there's a human condition.
Well,
Right.
yes. Yeah, yes, but I don't know, would you wanna learn history one way or the other way? Because like
Well, which history? The real history or the one that we tell ourselves?
yeah, okay, I know,
Both.
it's so layered.
Right.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I think my favorite approach to learning this stuff is bi-directional. So, like, I'll learn a little bit about Prometheus, then learn a little bit about the headless horseman, Cabal Crane. Might come across Testament of Solomon findings, but just kind of build like
Ping
taking these things from the far past and the future, or the now, future, far future. If you play with ideas, you can kind of bring them together, meet in the middle, and start to connect all of these nodes of wisdom, I guess, because they're supposed to be moral tales at the end of the day, right? They're supposed to
Mhm.
give you something.
Or
But
maybe just, like, continuity too. I mean, like, having all of those stories drawn together, it's pretty cool to just kind of step back and just like, "Huh." Pumpkins.
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 So, like, this idea of replacing your own head with a pumpkin's head in this little light, like, of enlightenment of sorts, grafted by envy. Um, do you think they're, like you said, we're envious of people's uh, stuff, but do you think we're envious of people's minds? Like, do we do this on the daily?
Oh man. I mean, well, maybe not the daily, but I do think that like if I hear somebody speaking and they have a really good understanding of history or they use a lot of really great words, I'm like, "Oh man, I need to look up those words." Like I do kind of think, "Oh, I should totally read more or study." You know what I mean? Like I should just deep dive into all these topics. And then like physicists, I really wish like I knew more about all that stuff. So I don't know. I mean, maybe that's a
You
human
don't
condition
necessarily
because we
envy
can't.
the person, you
Well,
just envy
no,
the information.
what don't okay. I was gonna say we're not omniscient, and we want to envy other minds because we have this want to know the greater truths of the world.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I don't know. I got
No,
a little.
it makes sense. And tying in Nick's idea that, you know, envious of the ideas and not the human. I think it's like once you can divide the human from their ideas, you can begin to extrapolate and integrate those ideas into your life and your behaviors without having to walk down this envious road. Right? Because I've been in the very fortunate position where I haven't been envious of somebody's knowledge base in since like freshman university, like since I went from community college to university and I saw the knowledge gap in between. I became really envious of the students that just went there from, their freshman year on, because there was such a wide divide. But I definitely do think this weird thing where it's, I don't know if it's like cool to be smart or like it's good to be smart or whatever, that invites in all the envy in the same way of the material sense. And I think can end up causing more damage because it's all mental envy.
Yeah. I
It's,
mean,
it's not like I could buy a book and be like, oh yeah, now I'm, the smartest person alive or something. There's something more damaging, I think, in the fire of the jack-o'-lantern.
hmm. Yeah, I mean, I guess now I'm wondering like what is envy exactly? Because I mean, like you can notice the difference in acquisition, I guess, material things or thoughts and knowledge and stuff. But to like be envious, I guess that's maybe a different thing. I mean, because envy, that, I don't know.
Have
I'm
you ever
thinking
been
of
envious?
jealousy. Now, well, I'm asking myself now. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna look it up. I
Yeah, what
totally
are,
just,
do you, can you also a bigger question is, can we even discern the difference like between envy and jealousy or like other negative covetous feelings, I guess?
I was gonna say, because I was gonna talk about the color green, and then I was like, oh, that's jealousy. So envy is a feeling of discontented or resentful longing aroused by someone else's possessions, qualities, or luck. Which is
And
interesting.
that
Discontented and resentful. Those are two totally different feelings that just get lumped in there. It's interesting.
is one compound feeling.
Yes.
Well, so like further to like, do you think whenever we run across the super smart AI, the alien invasion, whatever, is the envy of humanity going to be our downfall? So, whenever you looked at the pumpkin or you looked at the fire and the jack-o'-lantern, like the pumpkin, just yeah, don't worry about it. I want my pumpkin spice latte. Let's not dive into these things. Do you think we'll repeat that mistake once? Because we're going to be envious of alien tech for sure, or AI tech.
That's a good question. Nick, do you want to take that one?
Well, it depends on how we get it and if we actually get to use it. I mean, like if there's some sort of instance in which aliens come here to just start like taking over and ruling us, then I could see where we would have some envy towards their advanced technology. But I don't know. I mean, There's a lot of things that would contribute to the end of society, and I just don't know if it's envy is going to be one of those things. I think our perhaps in the respect that we have the same envy that this personified demon has, where it's like an insatiable desire to continue to fill some sort of void that we feel. um, if that's the case, then yes, I could definitely see that. I think that the creation of AI is kind of in lines of trying to fill that void as well. But like we were talking about a little bit before, the goalpost always moves. So whereas AI right now is the end goal and sort of like the be all end all, as soon as it's here, there's going to be a new goal, and it'll just be up to us to see whether these goals are going to fall into a more destructive path or bring us into something better. I don't think that answers anything. But
No, it did. It's just the mic was a little bit muffled. I don't know if it was my
it's probably me. Sorry.
my headphones. My headphones are a little jank too, so I usually try to take a few moments of silence so I can try to maybe pull things out and play with the cord and be like, oh, there it is. It's fixed. No,
Technology, all this fear that we have about AI, and I'm over here just like, please, Wi-Fi, don't cut out at some point. The other day, I think I was like talking, and I was like, wow, they're really letting me talk, and I realized the Wi-Fi had gone out. It's funny.
I mean, yeah, I worry though that envy, as far as like interplanetary civil like diplomacy, I guess you call it, I worry that's going to be the downfall. Because like as humans, we haven't been in a technologically disadvantaged place ever. And if you look at our history, usually the technologically disadvantaged culture loses the war. So I wonder like if this envy could be good to try to steal some of that alien knowledge to kind of get away from this envy and hopefully not devour our own heads when trying to deal with aliens or AI. And you're right, like we will always move the goalposts, but that's part of the human condition. Like you set yourself a goal, you meet the goal, you move the goalposts. Or if you want, you can just go around in the loop, right? You could just set the same goal and achieve it over and over and run the wheel, but that seems Sisyphean. Like it seems like you're just doing it to do it.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to me that we will beat envy by playing its game.
Yeah. No, that's for sure.
Are we trying to create AI so that we have something smarter than us to plan out the retaliation against these aliens that might come one day? I just had this thought because you were talking about it, and I was thinking to myself, like, yeah, why are we really like obsessed with AI? Like, I mean, gosh. And then I think it's just like, are we trying to create a god, some kind of omniscient, all-knowing thing that we can just throw our hands up in the air and be like, hey, these things came here, compute how to win, or compute a new war machine to fight the aliens, or something. You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, I think
I don't know what the
'cause
hopes are for AI.
look at our addiction to truth, right? Like we need some authoritarian to tell us what the truth is in order for it to be the truth. So that AI does become like a god. It becomes the thing of like, I could throw my hands up and say, I don't know. Just go ask the AI. And there's so much shame in not knowing something for some reason. Maybe it becomes more, what's the word I'm looking for? Like you can feel it. It starts with a T, tangible. That feeling becomes more tangible the higher up in intellectual realms you go. And thus the intellectual envy also raises. So the fires rise or whatever. Oh, now I've lost my train of thought. Oh dear.
No, I think I think Ayla hit it on the head though. We are creating God. We're trying to create God because we've abandoned God in the sort of biblical sense, or the ancient sense. So I think that, yes, we are trying to find that entity that we can just kind of put all of our faith in and have something that tells us definitively what the answer is. And it's always about finding that answer. And yeah, I'm not convinced that and
That we can make something to do that. Well, yeah,
no,
like
even if it did exist, I'm not convinced that would fill the void that we're trying to fill.
no. Well, I mean, think
We just
about
find
like
a new
when
word.
Siri. Oh, go ahead. Oh, well, I'll just Siri. Like when it first came out, one of the most asked questions was, "What's the meaning of life?" And like I
Hmm.
think she like directed them to Wiki or something, and it's like, oh, okay, because it's a self-contained system. AI is only going to know what we input into it. So it might give you a cool answer based on all of knowledge today, but it could change tomorrow.
It's very true.
Hmm.
Mm. Hmm.
Um, I think the last little bit I want to touch on is Promethean sacrifice and pumpkin
Mm.
carvings.
Ah. Oh gosh.
Yeah, right. So Prometheus sets up the sacrifice of the ox, and he tricks Zeus. Like he gives, they're trying to figure out. The Greeks are trying to figure out how to properly sacrifice an animal. Prometheus tricks Zeus by, letting him choose what sacrifice he wants. He hands him two plates. On one plate is the fat of the ox with all the bones underneath, and on the other, I think, is like a proper plate. I forget. But Zeus, if Zeus is all knowing, he chooses to be tricked to either find a way to vent about things, or if he doesn't know, he is actually tricked. And so then from there on in the future, the Greeks only sacrifice the bones and the fat of the body. Now, when we carve pumpkins to make faces to fight against the evil spirits, we typically isn't like that pulp of the pumpkin also known as the fat of the pumpkin. Anyways, we carve them out and then we pull out all the seeds and the guts, and then we just kind of throw it on top of each other and throw it out. And seeing that plants feel pain, and in my uh, anthropomorphism of plants, to me, plants are animals. So, can pumpkin carving be seen as a form of ritual sacrifice of the pumpkin? And also it's so ubiquitous, we don't have to worry that much about it.
Hmm.
Or am I just stretching here? Because I think I'm stretching a bit, but it's fun.
No, I don't think it's
It is
really
fun.
that. I don't think it's that much of a stretch at all if you're thinking about it. I mean, like you literally are gutting the thing and then creating a face, carving a face into it, and then putting a little tiny light in it. It's definitely ritual. It's definitely some sort of ritual thing that we're doing, and it's obviously an amalgamation of harvest rituals and for not fertility death rituals. Yeah. So I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, there's definitely a lot of heavy symbolism in that.
that all comes from Samhain. I think it is
Mm-hmm.
Samhain is the festival.
Mm-hmm.
But Irish in nature, let me find my notes. The carving of vegetables has been a common practice in many parts of the world, and gourds were one of the earliest plant species farmed by humans, circa 10,000 years ago. It's believed that the custom of making a jack-o'-lanterns at Halloween time began in Ireland in the 19th century. Yeah, they were hollowed out faces. Uh, by those who made them, the lanterns were said to represent either spirits or supernatural beings, or were used to ward off evil spirits. And then also from the same festival, you get trick or treating, where um, I think they called it guising and mumming,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to go from house to house and ask for food and would put on a little play for the people. There's
Mm-hmm.
some class struggle threads in there too, that like it was just the poor that would do it, but that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But yeah,
Yeah.
no, I agree that these rituals come from some like these rituals are important, and I find it interesting that if you just elevate plants to animals, that you find this weird sacrificial story that is ancient that we still do today.
Yeah, and it's like a sacrificial story coupled with a protection spell and an honoring of the dead.
True.
Because you think about it, what you're doing is you're creating a little altar or little animus or familiar out of a jack-o'-lantern in order
Kind of
to,
are.
yeah, in order to protect you from evil spirits. And that little jack-o'-lantern sits outside your doorway And so that the spirits, especially on All Hallows Eve, when they roam the earth, will not be wanting to mess with you because you have your own spirit guarding your threshold.
Well, I feel less bad about sacrificing the pumpkins on our doorstep now. Because when you first said that, Mike, I was like, oh no, I don't think I can carve it. And then you said the next bit, and I'm like, oh no, I think I have to carve it. And I looked it up too. They said that some of the original carvings were supposed to be really so that they scare away Jack from homesteads. And then, yeah, I mean, like just what you said.
No, you think about it, like a drunk ghost is roaming around, and
Dude.
what you need to do to keep him away is have these faces at your door so that he thinks that people are looking at him and you can't break into your house.
Yeah.
It's like when you're drunk and you wander by your ex's house. You're like, oh no, I'm just gonna keep going.
She's got a light. She's got a face in the window.
Yeah, there's a face in the window.
She must be dating someone else. I gotta keep going. It's pretty good. Well, and then it's funny because you usually put them by your doorway, you know, and it's funny that we still have this like we have like a weird thing about entranceways and doorways, because like even for like Navajos, if we're gonna have a ceremony, you hang a blanket in the window, like a pretty colored blanket. And that lets all the spirits know, like, oh, you know, they're praying over there. Let's go hang out and hear some songs, you know.
Cool.
That's a cool, like, history, though. Thanks for putting this together, man.
Yeah, I've ran all out of pumpkin things. I have one last question, though.
Yes.
Do you believe in the Great Pumpkin?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that's all I got. If you want to take it away, Nick.
Awesome.
Any last words? Anything?
Yeah, that was fantastic. I really appreciate that. Who knew? You said that you were going to do a pumpkin episode last week, and I was like, hey, I'm for it as long as you can make it last, an hour and a half, and you got it. You nailed it.
There's more. Trust me, we could all Hallows.
Sure.
We could but I think this is a good kind of like division of storytelling.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I know. When you said it, I was like, oh, pumpkins. I was like trying to be supportive, and I was like, well, there's Cinderella, and like Ichabod Crane, and that's about all I got. And then I think last night I was thinking to myself, pumpkins. 90 minutes of pumpkins.
Everybody loves pumpkins.
They do.
Yeah, I do. I mean, shoot, I got 2 pumpkins sitting outside ready for carving. So.
We have Dijon here that said, don't forget about pumpkin spice lore. Dijon, we talked a little bit about it in the beginning of the episode. So just rewind it a little bit and we'll mention it. But yes, pumpkin spice lore is very sacred to the Ugg-wearing white woman. So
the Becky. Known in the financial world as the Beckys.
Yeah, the Beckys. There you go. Yeah.
Oh my God. Half of me is so offended.
Yeah, that's it. I know, I'm being offended. Sorry about that.
Trick or treat.
Just call me a trick? The heck? Last note though, going back to the jack-o'-lantern story that you said that they would put the pumpkins out and then people would collect, food and go house to house. But you also said something about a little play. And isn't it interesting that like schools will take kids and be like, okay, we're going to do a costume parade. It's like a little play.
Yeah.
So wild.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you so much, you guys. Thank you, Mike. That was a great episode. Appreciate your contribution to Exofathom. And I hope you guys enjoyed this episode too. We would love to hear some feedback from you guys. Anytime you got something to say, please just leave it in the comments and we will be sure to read it and respond to it. And let us know how you feel about let us know how you feel about this episode and any subsequent episodes. If you have any ideas about what you'd like to hear from us in future episodes, please let us know. Be sure to follow us on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, all at Exofathom. Give us a like, give us a subscription if you feel like it. No pressure. But thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it. And we hope you guys have a wonderful Monday evening. And until next time, Cognonauts, we will see you on the next Exofathom. Good night.
Peace.
Later.